If you're not in my Discord, or if you've not been paying attention, you may not have noticed. In fact, I guess if you weren't in my Discord, this would be impossible for you to notice. I made a topic, or I made a channel, I should say, that is a topic request. And the first one I got was about pressure in competitive environments. So we're gonna talk about that here. Hello. How to play under pressure like during game 5. Okay, so before we actually start on how to do this, we're gonna talk about what can contribute to you feeling pressure. Tournament, right? Tournament experience. Let me emphasize, when I say competitive environments, it's not just tournaments. Something you need to take seriously experience instead of a tournament experience. It's not so linear in the sense of like, only tournaments and that's it. Casuals, usually you do not want to feel this way during it, but obviously like there are situations that would be still classified as casuals. Like, I don't know, if someone was talking shit to you and you're like, oh, I'm gonna smoke you. Something you want to win that has merit. That's basically what this is. There's things like, doubt or lack of confidence in beating the opponent. This sounds heavier than it really is, but it comes down to like, if you go even with someone, you may not be thinking like, oh, I can beat them like 7-0. You know what I mean? Like, that's the sort of thing that this can come up through. If you have in a kind of a hierarchical thought process, you can feel pressured even if you are normally confident, right? Like discussing what we're talking about, you can feel pressured to win against people you think are weaker. All these things can contribute to it. There are a bunch more things. Like, some people feel pressured to perform at a high level despite no high level performances in the past. A lot of it is ego. A bit of it is the pressure of the situation. All of these things can be mitigated. Obviously, if you 100-0 someone, you're probably not going to feel this way. All of these things can be used against you. Things like popping off, or people who consistently just complain about one character or a type of character. Usually that is information people can use to beat you. Pressure can make you do some stupid fucking shit in tournament. A lot of it is ego. You can cut this out, but you can never remove this, right? If there's something you want to win, there's gonna be pressure around it. This being said, you can get better at dealing with the pressure of things, right? Like, for example, if I'm going to be a little more detailed, competitive play, it's like playing on screen when you're not used to it. Pressure of being outside your comfort zone, whether this be you're some people just straight up like playing games or at tournaments from their bedroom, right? Like, that's just their vibe. They like that shit, and I'm with them. I don't want to leave my bedroom to enter a tournament. I entered a tournament every month in 2019, and by the end of it, I was like, I'm ready to stay in bed. You can change this obviously by going to a lot of tournaments. All these things are adjustable, but you will never get rid of this part. A lot of people I've seen are super confident about themselves for EVO, which is crazy to me, because EVO is the tournament historically that you do not feel comfortable going into. I mean, especially if you know how EVO used to run, it's probably gonna be a lot better this year, but EVO is that shit is the Oregon Trail of tournaments. It was long as fuck. Everything was expensive. There's no water. People are stinky. The bathrooms are crowded. It's brutal. With Strive, I mean, there's a lot of people, and sometimes if you just play enough, in a day, you'll burn out and you'll just full. That's one of my weaknesses, especially just adjusting from Exert to Strive. So for me personally here, I don't want to strike through again. Exert tournaments usually vary between 200 and 400 people. When Strive released, the average becomes 600 to 1,000, right? And then obviously in the case EVO, it's anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000. Now, for me, that was really hard to adjust to, because that meant I had to play more, I had to spend more time playing, and I was not prepared for that. How you play around this, mental aspects of competing. You need to understand you will never play 100% in tournament. You may have games that you play very well, but there's never going to be a tournament you play 100% all the way through. The longer or closer a set goes on, the more likely you your performance will begin to falter, right? I don't want to say falter, that's it makes me sound old. It is very important to have a reliable base for all your approaches. You may remember that how I approach fighting games is if I do not have a reason for why I did something, I would consider it like a failure. Like even if it worked, like even if I did it in a set 100 times over, if I couldn't explain why I did it, I would say that was bad. And the reason for that is because if I don't have a real goal with why I do something, then that means in tournaments, it can actually contribute to me failing more. I value this the most. If you go into a tournament expecting to overperform, you're probably crazy. It is not common. There are players that definitely play better sometimes, but not throughout the whole tournament. That is the key part. You can have matches where you excel, but not like whole run. And this is not just a product of like you, but it's a product of how tournaments are formatted. When you kind of have like a reliable base for your approaches, as in you know what to do when like, you know, X comes up. Oh my god, I forgot that it works. Look at the cool X. It helps you kind of memorize like, okay, well, if Leo does 5k, 6k, I can IB throw. Whereas if you're just trying to throw randomly after Leo, like 5k or 6k, then you're probably gonna get fucking smoked. All it takes, especially in a game like Strive, is to fold once. A character could like just steamroll you because you panicked and accidentally threw in a situation you could not throw in. All these things are very valuable. This is not to say, like, you know, RPS heavy playstyles are invalid. Where they shine is that you can kind of, like, almost control people's reaction in high pressure situations, right? Like, usually you could think of it as, usually people who are very RPS heavy tend to be a lot better at controlling situations in high pressure environments because they're just used to committing like that, right? Whereas you may not be. If someone is under pressure, they may fold, they may act predictable. This does go both ways. Sometimes RPS players, if they play against someone that like will just lean into the RPS with them, they may start to panic in the same way. You may notice I'm talking a lot more about how playstyles can impact it rather than the situation. And this is kind of important because, again, a lot of the pressure you're going to feel is being outside of your comfort zone, right? Playing off pressure. Tournaments, especially, are basically entirely different than casuals. When you play in casuals, you have a layer of just like, you know, playing matchup to matchup, player to player. When it comes to tournaments, they can play off of the pressure you feel, right? Like in casuals, if I was playing against you, I would not be inclined to just wait things out, right? So like this isn't a good example of what I mean. So in tournaments, it's very easy to get overwhelmed or like stressed by the pressure you feel. I've mentioned before how like things like popping off can be a sign that you like hold a lot of pressure when you're playing. Some people are really bad at holding it, which means in casuals, I would not wait things out. In tournament, I would wait things out purely to make them uncomfortable and commit early. This is kind of what I mean. You can kind of play the game differently because of the circumstances around it. Understanding this is very important to growing as a tournament player. Like this is kind of like an unspoken thing. But if like some people can just not hold the stress of playing in a high like pressure environment. Some people just immediately fold and will ID like button at you like instantly. Like it's one of the most common things. Like, you know, be put in a position where they may have to play patient or reactionary or like play a more like advanced neutral game. And then they're just like, oh fuck, I need to do something. I'm losing the more the time, like that time goes on. Some people do this and they they tend to like even spiral a bit with their mentality, like, oh, if I don't do something now, I'm gonna lose. My perspective on like, you know, things like this are more like, if you aren't willing to do something like and go the extra mile of how like to like work on things or be more comfortable with things like this, then there will be someone who does that will probably take advantage of the fact that you don't. Let's talk about actually having a game plan in pressure. Let's actually get to the thing that the topic is about. I know we took like 25 minutes. It is important to not do something just because you can. Do something that you think will be good. There's a big difference between the two. Doing something because you can could be 6p, 6p, 6p with and neutral. Doing something you think that might be good is maybe like 5-8, like 5-8 at a distance where you could get a counter hit. Even basic things like this, where pressure may incentivize you to just overcommit because you are panicking, or you're like, oh, it's high pressure, I need to do something, I need to win. The more you get into that, the more you'll become predictable, because essentially, and this is very important, wanting to win is a play style in tournaments. This is, when you think about it like this, it'll become a lot easier to understand. Most people will get to a point where they're like, I'm about to win and I want to win, right? Again, this is a normal thing because of the 5D mentality, yeah. I mean, that's actually a great example, right? If you're low health, people may become more predictable with the unpredictable option. If you play against someone like a Zato and they have no meter and you have a pixel, I bet this motherfucker is gonna start throwing out the 5Ds, right? Basically, wanting to win can be a playstyle in the sense of it can make people rely on options that may be like, oh, like I just need to take this hit. You know, one, it doesn't matter if it like gets blocked as much. If they get hit, they die. Win wanders. When you are playing under pressure, like again, especially like game 5, you will probably lean more on autopilot habits because of stress. This means if your autopilot habits fucking suck, then you're probably just gonna implode. In fact, a lot of people are also guilty of that, where they play great game 1, game 2, they lose 2 games, last round, right? And then they just fold, because like they go back to all their autopilot habits and they're done, right? If you don't have that base and you're just like, well, I play off feel, then if you play against someone that, you know, is a lot different than what you're used to, you may just be fucked. Like straight up, you may just be done. I feel like a lot of people, when they ask about this, it's about how to like completely eliminate the stress of competitive environments, but it is impossible because of what I said. But you can mitigate how much of it you experience. Now that leads me to this point: comfort or rituals. Rituals sounds kind of weird. Comfort is very important in tournaments. I wonder if I can find Demendo once made a Evernote document. A lot of it is based around things like, you know, eat, sleep well, whatever makes you most comfortable in competing. A lot of people get stressed and they're like, oh, I'm just gonna sit here and wait the whole time, and then that's it, right? And then they just like, they forego food, they don't have any water, and then they just fucking implode, right? The better you take care of yourself, the better you will do in tournament. The worse you take care of yourself, the worse you do in tournament. This might as well be in fucking gold letter. This is very, 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 very important. If you're sick, nobody thinks like, oh, I'm gonna play like a god. There's a story, Evo 2018, I went in the day of the bracket, I got sick as fuck. I was extremely ill. And I remember very distinctly, before the tournament, I played Sway in casuals. I asked him like, oh, does this feel laggy to you, like the monitor? And he's like, no, it feels normal like everything else. And I remember thinking like, I'm fucked. You know what I mean? Like, that's basically what it's like. Like, you're not going to be playing 100% if you don't take care of yourself or you're not in the best condition, right? Like, I remember it very, very, very clearly. But yeah, that's basically it.